So I'm recording this in my son's bedroom while they're getting ready for bed. Hence the astronaut theme. Although I dig it, I would totally decorate my room like this. But nonetheless, this is part two of week 13, and it is the craziest case. So I was really excited to devote this specific lecture to just this case because it is just insane and it's like super fun to dig into. Okay, so you ready? Okay, I'm really excited about this. All right, so you'd recognize this cartoon, I am sure. And this cartoon is the perfect cartoon to exemplify Brady. Okay, so poor Brady. Brady, I mean, once you hear the story, your heart will really feel bad for Brady, or at least mine does, because he just really pulled the short end of the stick in many regards. But I'll start out with this. Brady himself, the story, is important to understand because I think it gives context to ultimately what happened and why it unraveled the way it did. Okay. So Brady was a young man who had joined the army as a young man, had gone to Cuba, he was training Cubans to fight against Fidel Castro's rebel regime. And when he got out of the army, like many veterans, he didn't know what to do with his life and he was struggling to make ends meet. And he made a best friend, and his best friend was named Donald, and Donald had a sister. Mm. Well, Brady fell head over heels in love with her, but there was a problem. She was married. Yikes. But there was an even bigger problem. Brady got her pregnant. Eek, right? So at that point, divorce isn't on the table because this is 1950s territory, right? So, like many young women during that time period, she went to go visit an aunt, in New York. And so Brady felt terrible. So he wrote her a check, this check. And this check for $35,000 in the 1950s, he swore up, down, and sideways that he would have the money that he was writing this check for within 3 days. So, of course, he didn't have this money. But he told her brother Donald, hey, let's go rob a bank. And Donald said to him, well, do you have a car to do this? And Brady was like, no, but I know where we can get one. So they had a family friend who lived in the woods that just got an amazing, beautiful Ford Fairlane. And so, whoop, hold on one second. Yes, honey. Yes, honey. Allie, I'm doing a video. What's up? I told you I was doing a video. What's up? Yes, honey. What's up? Oh my gosh. Honey, you know how to turn off the water, should? You silly goose. And yes, you do. Okay. Thank you. Well, you're definitely stirring bubbles. Yeah, you're definitely the bubble queen. All right, bubble girl. All right. All right, that was almost a water catastrophe. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so back to the story. Um, so they knew this man in the woods that was a family friend had a Ford Fairlane. So it was a comedy of errors. They decided in order to steal the Ford Fairlane, they were going to place a log in the middle of the street in which they knew this man took this road every day to go to work. And so they knew that when this man saw this road, this log blocking the road, he would have to get out to move it. And that would give them the opportunity to pop out of the bushes and then knock him over the head and then throw him in the trunk, right? And all the while block their faces to where he would never know it was them. And then they could take the car, rob the bank, and everything would be dandy. But that's not how it went down. So, unfortunately for them, they put the log in the middle of the road, right? So far, so good. However, when they caught up with him and they bashed him over the head, they did not put him in the trunk because he didn't really fall unconscious like they had hoped. Instead, they put him in the back seat and he came to and he sees them and he's like, ah, and they're like, ah, again, Beavis and Butthead. So they pull over and Brady's like, don't hurt him, don't hurt him. Instead, Donald's like, I'll take care of it. We need to do something. We need to kill him. And so Brady's telling him, no, don't do it. He's a family friend. He's a nice guy. So Donald says, I'm not going to kill him. But he did. He didn't shoot him, but he strangled him. And what's sad is they even put, Donald did, his little lunchbox next to him. So sad. And it was discovered almost immediately because the man was religious about going to work. And when he didn't show up to work, all of his coworkers were like, that's weird. He always comes to work. And so they immediately called the cops. And within less than 24 hours, they're like, hey, we saw him with Donald and with Brady. So, small town. And they immediately put out their feelers to notify them, pick them up, take them in for questioning. But this is where it gets even crazier. You ready for this? Brady took out $250 from the man's wallet. And guess what he did with it? He took off to Cuba and he tried to join Fidel Castro's rebel regime. Ah, isn't that crazy? Okay, so he tries to join the rebel regime. He's in Cuba, legit. And he could have gotten away with it, by the way. But he was so heartbroken and racked with guilt about Nancy because apparently she actually tried to cash the check. Insanity. And of course, the bank was like, yeah, there's nothing in this bank account. And they basically laughed her out of the bank. And she was furious, right? And so Brady hears about all this and he, again, just feels horrible. So he actually goes to the American embassy, turns himself in. They fly him to Miami, take him in for questioning. He's now being interrogated. And this is where it gets kind of crazy. By the way, now this is John Brady, and then Charles is right here, but they call him Donald. Like his friends usually called him Donald, but that was his official name. So now we've laid the groundwork, the backstory. So as you can see, Donald, Charles, was not a great fellow. We're not really rooting for him. So they're in separate rooms, cops interrogating Donald, cops interrogating Brady. They ask Donald, were you the one that strangled him? He says no. They ask him again, were you the one that strangled him? He says no. They ask him a third time, were you the one that strangled him? No. Were you the one that strangled him? No. The fifth time, were you the one that strangled him? Guess what he says? Yeah, I did. And it was me. Brady had nothing to do with it. This time is the important one. So they hand over the four. They don't hand over to the defense this fifth one. So, for all intents and purposes, they have nothing to indicate that Brady was innocent. So, Brady, the first time, he actually tries to take the fall and he says, okay, I helped him, because again, Brady's not too bright. And all the rest of them, he says, I didn't do it, didn't do it, didn't do it. So, yikes, right? So, he's convicted. He's not in a good place. Let me go back to this one. Years and years and years and years and years later, there was a mistake. And thank goodness for this mistake. On appeal, somebody made the mistake of accidentally putting in that fifth confession. And you could tell it was a mistake because it was accidentally crumpled up. It was like stuck in between papers. And apparently it was at the very, very, very bottom of a very, large set of documents in a legal file box that was submitted to the appellate attorney. And as they're looking through it, they find it and they're like, oh my gosh, we never even knew this existed. This is insane. Like, what was this? And so they appealed it and it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the United States Supreme Court looked at this and the question was, should the state have given this information to the defense? Did Brady have a fair trial? Did he have proper due process? Because remember, due process is everybody has the right to notice and an opportunity to be heard, meaning you know why you're in trouble, but you also get the right to a trial. But did he get a fair trial? Did he get a right to defend himself when he didn't have all the tools in the toolbox? And they ultimately said no, that he was not afforded proper due process. And so that is what opened the door to the exclusionary rule, to exculpatory evidence. So exculpatory evidence, the Brady rule, in which it's also known, is any information that is suppressed by prosecution, meaning possessed by the prosecution, that is favorable to the defendant. So it's reasonably probable that evidence would have made a difference. Now, this is important, Maria, because it doesn't have to be the smoking gun. It doesn't have to prove that Brady was innocent. It just has to be helpful. And a lot of people get that mixed up. They may think that the evidence has to prove that the defendant was innocent. That's not the case. It just has to be helpful. That's it. And it has to be admissible. Now, the way I like to explain this is it can't, they don't have the duty to hand over evidence like my cousin's brother's uncle said that he did it. Well, that's not admissible anyway because that's hearsay, right? So they're not saying that the prosecution has to hand over that information because again, that's not admissible anyway. So it has to be admissible. And what used to be a requirement is that it had to be requested by the defendant, but that's no longer required. Now it's just instant. They have to hand it over, period, the end. So exculpatory evidence is evidence in the state's possession that is just favorable to the defendant. Now, I wanted to point out something that's really interesting about this case. In the end, regarding Brady, when he was released, he actually got a criminal justice degree, married a nurse, and had a wonderful life. He actually gave lots of presentations throughout the United States about the impact that this had on his life and how he was very proud that even though his experience, his life had been severely impacted by this, that he was glad that the Brady rule existed to hopefully help others that were in his position. And then him and his wife had divorced. And then after he was a criminal justice major, he was like, you know what, peace out. And then he became a truck driver and he just traveled the United States, still giving talks while he, delivered produce and other goods and services. So Brady lived a very interesting life. He also wrote poetry while he was in prison, and it's pretty amazing, albeit very, very sad. So that is Brady in a nutshell. So I'm going to also do now the death penalty lecture. So that'll be the third and last lecture, Maria. So I hope you enjoyed Brady and the astronaut decor. All right, see ya.